Welcome to Healing Horizons, where each week we share the latest news and research in trauma informed care, positive and adverse childhood experiences, and psychological safety. I'm Allison Sabula.
And I'm Brie Twombly, and we are both part of 10 Collective, where we are working to create a world where we genuinely care for one another. We want you to consider hiring us to help you to implement trauma-informed care, psychological safety-based programs, and policies to help you better care for your employees, so your employees can in turn then provide better services and care for the communities and families that you serve.
That's what we're trying to do. So before we get started, we just want to acknowledge that our hearts are really heavy with the news of yet another school shooting, this time in Winder, Georgia, and we are really feeling very sad about this news, especially on the first week of school. Our hearts go out to all of those affected, and especially to parents everywhere throughout the United States who have to worry about sending their children to school. Part of the mission at 10 Collective includes violence prevention and the awareness of some of the causes behind violence. So we're going to keep doing the work that we're doing, and it's our strong wish to prevent these types of tragedies in the future, but we have a lot of work collectively to do. So, okay, the news this week in these realms. So today is Thursday, September 5th, 2004. And so content advisory, we will be talking about trauma and sometimes violence. So there's a trash pickup in the background. Can you hear that?
I can like barely hear it. It's not super loud. So you're okay.
Someday I will get the recording studio of my dreams. It has to happen. Because yeah, it's just too much. Okay. So holistic mental health is the key to Maui's recovery. And this is a piece from Hawaii Business Magazine. Mental health therapy must be as diverse as the people who need it. That's why it can be so impactful to redefine mental health services through an indigenous lens, according to Keola Mau Tengen, executive director of Wailuku nonprofit Ka'eu, whose program uses a Hawaiian cultural worldview to address mental health. So they offer, and they're using their indigenous language terms here, which I'll try and get through these. We offer an Aina, which means land, or Kai, which means ocean-based program to get the body moving and acting in service and connection to nature. Love to hear that. We then combine, because I was an environmental science major in undergrad, and I still remember like the first day of class when I started my freshman year and talking about how human beings feeling like we're disconnected from nature instead of a part of nature is at the root of so much violence. So this is something that really combines, environmental science with our field here, violence prevention. Yeah. So we then combine that with different activities based on Hawaiian art and culture. That's wonderful. The program offers 4 to 6 cultural activity stations at no charge to attendees, and through repetitive activities such as lei making or lau hala weaving, helps ground participants back into their body so they can start to open up and share their feelings. Supporting their work with a Maui Strong Fund grant is part of Hawaii Community Foundation's culturally grounded and holistic approach to Maui's mental health response. Wow, that's great. So embracing the principles of trauma-informed care, it recognizes that a variety of alternative therapies can help individuals impacted by a collective trauma reflect on and improve their mental health. So the strategy stems from Hawaii's efforts to become a trauma-informed state. That's amazing. In February 2024, the governor, Josh Green, declared Hawaii trauma-informed and directed the state's Office of Wellness and Resilience to implement a trauma-informed care framework throughout state departments and with community-based organizations. So, HCF strategy has resulted in better coordination and more diverse therapeutic support options for fire-affected households. For example, the foundation has contracted 9 clinicians and group practices to provide free therapy sessions to affected individuals, up to 10 sessions, and on-site mental health support at community meetings. It's a short-term solution to reduce barriers to mental health care, such as a lack of insurance, or when individuals find it too difficult to get therapy approved by their health insurance. So, that is wonderful. So they're providing resources for a short-term solution because there are barriers, and they're implementing a program and funding a program that's culturally, not just culturally sensitive or culturally responsive, but sounds like created by in community. So that's wonderful. I didn't know actually that Hawaii was a trauma-informed state. So that's great. Okay, second piece here. Fort Worth-based nonprofit aims to make art lessons for kids more accessible. Okay, this is the type of intervention that I love to hear about. More playing. Yeah. So Fort Worth, Texas, Above the Clouds, Texas, a faith-based nonprofit offering free ballet. I'm already just like, yes. Dance and theater and hip hop, singing. This is it. Offering free ballet, theater, hip hop, jazz, and vocal lessons to children ages 5 through 17 arrived in Fort Worth 2 years ago. It aims to make arts education accessible to families who would not be able to afford it otherwise. The program relies on shoe and costume donations from dance studios, financial donations, and grants to help pay the dance instructors. Above the Clouds was co-founded in Wisconsin in 2001 by artist and professional dancer Linda Wade. She brings worship and dance to incarcerated women in Wisconsin and Texas prisons through a ministry called Discipleship Unlimited. So Wade formed the nonprofit as a way to make art a form of self-expression for kids with adverse childhood experiences and prevent them from being incarcerated later in life. Nearly half of the children in the program are in families who have been impacted by incarceration. She hopes the program can serve as a safe space for kids to explore the arts and express themselves. Participants are given a prayer teddy bear that wears a white t-shirt with red text that says, "All things are possible with God," as part of the program, which, is really can be probably very culturally relevant to a lot of people who live in these places and are practicing Christianity. So another culturally sensitive intervention, and love to see performing arts. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I think I've even just been looking into different art or music or like dance classes for my little one, and they are so expensive. They are not very accessible at all for families. So really learning that they're working on how do we remove some of these barriers and make these types of things accessible. Those ways to express yourself, your feelings, tell your story through movement and other methods. So love that so much.
Yeah.
Our next is adults experiencing mental health challenges benefit from Island Health's Bridging Care program. So this is in Victoria, Canada. People with acute and severe mental health challenges, which are significantly impacting their day-to-day lives, are receiving the care and supports they need to help them to improve their quality of life through Island Health's Bridging Care program. So the program offers recovery-oriented, trauma-informed intensive day treatment. It's opened in April of 2023, and the program has provided short-term, which is like 1 to 4 weeks, of skills-based services and transitional supports to 160 people who otherwise might have needed to be admitted to hospital for inpatient psychiatric care. The program has been so successful that Island Health is actually in the process of developing a virtual bridging care program to support people who live outside of the South Island. So love that they're thinking about accessibility and how can we increase that. The program's interdisciplinary team ranges from psychiatrists, occupational and recreational therapists, to nurses and peer support to teach skills. So things like mindfulness, stress tolerance, emotional regulation, interpersonal effectiveness. So really important, really great life skills there. Participants attend daily group sessions, participate in discussions and skills training. Outside of their kind of group work, they complete what they call homework, and receive one-on-one counseling to help them to practice and reinforce the skills that are relevant to their goals. The clients also have access to consultation with psychiatry while they're in the program. And then before discharge, they have a plan in place to continue to support their wellness and goals. An incredibly important step that I was really glad to hear that they were offering. I wanted to share a participant quote that was included in the article, where the participant said, "My binder with practical tools and my safety crisis plan helps me manage my depression and anxiety every day. I am grateful for my son and husband. The circle of control enables me to understand what is in my control and what is not in my control. I also write a pleasant event down every day, like lunch out with my husband, and I write my weekly SMART goals." I really loved the tools that they were thinking about, that it seems like they're really providing some good counseling and coaching around how are we using these tools, things like gratitude, understanding circle of control. All of those things are really great and can really help to especially change if you're feeling really depressed or anxious during the day. So like to see some of the things that were happening in that program.
Yeah.
I will transition us now into our ACEs and PACEs kind of peer-reviewed research. So the first article that we have today to share is the effects of adverse and positive experiences on cardiovascular health in Australian children. This was in the International Journal of Cardiology, September of 2024. This was a longitudinal study of 1,874 Australian children, ages birth to 12 years old. The researchers found that adverse experiences have detrimental effects on cardiovascular health in children. They also found that children exposed to positive experiences had better cardiovascular health, and that positive experiences may buffer the detrimental effect of adverse experiences. So the researchers talked about promoting positive experiences and how that's needed to help to improve cardiovascular health. And a quote from one of the researchers stated, "This research shows that by investing in the early years, we can have healthier futures for all Australian children." And so I think this study is really showing the effect of long-term activation of our stress response system. When we have that, when we look at the kind of original ACEs study and the long-term kind of health effects that were shown, a lot of that's because we have this long-term activation of our stress response system, and that really has an impact on our body. And then we see how these positive childhood experiences help to put the brake on that stress response system. It helps to shut it down. It helps to slow it down, which helps to take that stress off of our cardiovascular system. So just really liked this study. What they found in it aligns a lot with, I think, the research that we've already seen with ACEs and PACEs. So,
yeah, just yet another study in alignment with the body of research that's out there. Yeah. So, okay, dimensions of early life adversity are differently associated with patterns of delayed and accelerated brain maturation. So this was in Biological Psychiatry, July of 2024. The research team used data from the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study, which includes a large sample of children and adolescents from across the United States. The researchers focused on a sample of approximately 11,800 children aged 9 to 14 years old. The study found that children who experience emotional neglect tend to have younger looking brains. Okay, interesting. This finding suggests that emotional neglect may delay brain maturation, possibly because the absence of emotional and social support slows the development of certain brain structures. The study also found that children exposed to more forms of adversity, such as caregiver mental illness and socioeconomic hardship, often have older looking brains. This suggests that these more intense forms of diversity might accelerate brain development, potentially as an adaptive response to stressful or dangerous environments. For instance, children living in unsafe neighborhoods or with caregivers who have mental health issues might develop faster to cope with these challenging circumstances. The study also found that the impact of certain adversities like caregiver mental illness and family aggression became more pronounced over time. This means that as children grew older, the brain age gap for those who had experienced these types of adversity increased, indicating a greater divergence from typical brain development patterns. This finding suggests that the effects of these adversities on brain development may accumulate or intensify as children grow older. So, for me, these types of studies are always very important because you can't really argue with brain scans and data from the brain. And our field really only exists because of the technological advancements that have occurred in the last 30 years that have enabled us to look more closely at the brain. Otherwise, it would be, back when Freud was first discovering through interviewing women that the reason a lot of them were experiencing what they were calling hysteria at the time was because they had been sexually molested as children. That these ideas were discredited, by other prominent men in the field who didn't want to look at this. So he had to pivot these ideas into something else. But due to technology that allows us to actually look at the brain, you can no longer say, no, child abuse has no effect, or no, child abuse isn't happening, because it's like, no, it's happening. Here's the hard data. So studies like this are at the core of this field. And I would encourage you to take a deeper look at this study, because these types of studies are so important for helping this field of health science continue to have the recognition that it needs to be taken seriously. So again, you can always go to our website, tend-collective.com, and then go to our blog section, and find a link to everything that we are discussing here today. And we will post the ones that we're discussing today on the blog tomorrow. Goes out in our newsletter. If you're not already getting our newsletter, you can sign up on our website. Okay. Next one, negative life events and emotional symptoms from ages 2 to 30 years. So this is in JAMA Network Open, August 2024. The objective was to assess whether vulnerability to negative life events varied across 5 developmental periods from preschool to young adulthood. They analyzed data from 3 community representative studies set in the southeastern US with a total of 3,258 participants. About half of which were female, age 2 to 30. So life events with emotional symptoms were compared across preschool, childhood, adolescence, late adolescence, and young adulthood. Stressful events had a larger association with emotional symptoms in young adulthood than in other developmental periods. Oh, that's very interesting. So vulnerable to traumatic and stressful events were generally similar across the first 3 decades of life. These findings suggest that response to stressful events is similar from childhood to adulthood. I'll be curious to dive in a little more on that. Yeah, that's very interesting. All right.
Yeah, that one was interesting to me because I think we talk about like different critical developmental like phases and like stages. Especially brain development for children and adolescents. So it's interesting to see that it was fairly similar across the whole. So I'd love to read more about that and see more studies. I think our last one for today, because we didn't have any psychological safety news for this week. So our last piece of news for today is the effect of childhood emotional abuse and neglect on disturbed dreaming frequency, the important role of rumination and perceived social support. And there's a bunch of terms in there that I will kind of clarify and define as I go through this. If you're like, what is rumination or what do they mean by disturbed dreaming? I will talk about it. So this was in a journal called Dreaming, which I had no idea there was a journal about dreaming, in the September 2024. So this study investigated the influence of emotional abuse and neglect, the mediating role of rumination, and the moderating role of perceived social support on the frequency of disturbed dreaming. So this had a total of 847 Chinese participants. Within the study, it had about 482 female, 365 male, so almost 50-50. And ages were 17 to 22 years. The study found that individuals who experienced higher levels of emotional abuse or neglect as children were more likely to have frequent disturbed dreams. So that includes things like nightmares that would wake the dreamer, as well as bad dreams that cause distress but do not wake the person. The research also identified rumination, or the tendency to focus on negative thoughts, as a key factor that mediates this relationship. So those who had experienced emotional abuse and neglect were more likely to ruminate, which in turn was associated with more frequent disturbed dreaming. This finding supported the idea that how individuals process their emotions and thoughts plays a crucial role in determining the frequency and intensity of their disturbed dreams. Um, they also found that social support did not appear to directly influence the relationship between emotional abuse and neglect and disturbed dreaming, but it did have a significant impact on how rumination affected disturbed dreaming. So participants who reported higher levels of social support were less likely to have frequent disturbed dreams, even if they were prone to ruminating. So they were really thinking that this suggests that having a strong support network may help individuals to be able to better cope with negative thoughts, helping to reduce the likelihood that these thoughts end up getting translated into kind of what they termed disturbed dreaming. So interesting study. It makes sense. Our brains try to process and do a lot of things at night when we're sleeping.
And a lot of people with trauma have really disturbing dreams.
Yeah.
And it's not something that we talk very openly about. I mean, it's taken so much work to even get trauma to be a field that's taken seriously. And we're not quite there with like the nuance of like, now let's also talk about dreams and all the different nuances that and different facets of our lives. So that's a really cool study.
Yeah, I think too, it's making me think of there's one time when I was early in my clinical career, I was definitely experiencing secondary traumatic stress, and I was
Yep.
having really disturbing, scary dreams,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
every night. And so just how it can impact you, and it comes out in all kinds of different ways. So
Yeah.
important to talk about it and to understand that it's a common and typical response to experiencing
Yeah.
scary and stressful things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in this week, and we will see you next week. Tuesday is my final. I've been going through the 8 realms of employee wellness based on our employee wellness wheel that we created and launched a couple months ago. So that's wrapping up. Session 8 is Tuesday, and we will be skipping the news segment next week. But we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Okay, bye everyone. Thanks for joining.